Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Albino Peacock Podcast. My guest today is Cliff, and he and I will be going into a deep dive into the way, the concept of the way, what the way means to us. We believe it's in line with what other people have spoken about when it comes to the way. This whole conversation came about because we noticed in our group of friends there's really no external reason why we're all friends and get along the way that we do. But we noticed that all of us, despite our different backgrounds, professions, and beliefs and cultures, we're all engaged in the way. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for listening. We hope you get value from this conversation. One of the things, one of the reasons why I want to talk about the way is because you and I introduced that idea to the group
Oh, okay.
was because I mentioned it talking about Miyamoto Musashi and his book and his biography, and I was having difficulty because Trina then asked, "What do you mean by the way?" And that's one thing I love about her is she's not afraid to ask
Right.
what is what. I was having trouble with it, and then you stepped in, and with what you had said, I was able to clarify more of what it meant to me. You helped me get the words.
Hmm.
When I talk about the way, I talk about harmonizing which with things that are and aligning myself with that in order to achieve what I want in a harmonious way. I don't like to beat my head against the wall. I don't like being angry. I don't like being frustrated. I want to not just achieve my goal, but achieve it in a joyful, grateful, creative way, which is one of the reasons why I ride motorcycles is because it's not the best, most efficient, easiest way to get from point A to B. It's a very roundabout way to get there from the fact that I have to put on gear, I have to plan things out ahead of time. I don't have the GPS right in front of my face for the most part. And that's why I enjoy the motorcycles because I've gone coast to coast. It's not the easiest way to travel coast to coast. I've traveled much more comfortably in an SUV coast to coast than a motorcycle, but the motorcycle was by far the best coast to coast trip I've had.
Hmm.
When you talk about the way, when you think about the way, because I've been hearing you mention it a lot more the last couple weeks, what is it that you think about the way, and why is it important for you to keep that in mind?
Hmm. Well, the way is really the path of no resistance. It is a set of laws in nature that are established from the beginning of time, and the idea is that these laws are so set in stone, so to speak, that if you act in harmony with them, they will lift you up and carry you on with very little effort toward your goals. If you cross them, they will crush you. So it's a matter of going within yourself, quieting the mind, closing your eyes, and meditating on the idea that there's a possibility here of laws which are like that. They are unspoken in a way, and yet once you start learning them, you'll see where all kinds of people have spoken about them, forever and ever and ever. It's just a way we translate those laws, and once you understand how the process goes, life really gets easy. It's a lot of fun. Um,
Well, one of the things that Trina had brought up is that when she thought of that idea of things are peaceful, things are fun, she thought boring. She thought, oh, it's then just all rainbows and butterflies and sitting on the beach. It's leisure. It's it's not fun because then you're not working. Like people who enjoy working because they have to figure things out. There's a little bit of resistance, just like going to the gym. If it's martial arts or weight training,
Hmm.
there's kind of a resistance. And she seemed to have this idea that peaceful, harmonious is boring.
Yeah, I see peaceful and harmonious as the ultimate creative space.
Okay.
If you have no pressure to produce anything at all, and you can imagine it in your mind, that's the first step, is imagining. And once you can imagine something in your mind, pretty soon, if you keep on doing it over and over and over again, you'll start finding ways to physically start the the movement. Um, but it all starts with the thought. You have to be passionate about the thought. And if you start off with the idea that things are supposed to be hard, well, then they are. And if you start off with the thought, which I've adopted over the years, is that things shouldn't be hard at all if you're harmonious with the laws of nature and nature's source. So that's the real difference. I look at it as something that is so delightful that I could hardly imagine myself ever trying to adopt some other kind of an attitude. Although I know that I have to keep my mind open because there's a lot of stuff I don't know.
Hearing you talk about the way makes it clear to me that for you it's an adventure. It's a part of the way is enjoying the way in order to enjoy life.
Right.
Well, I met a young man yesterday. I was helping a buddy out. He'll be a guest on this podcast as well, Malachi. And the young man who helped us with his chore, I was talking about my buddy's brother who has a grudge against me, and one of the causes for that is resentment because we grew up so alike since we were little kids, and our lives still kind of mirror each other, but we have completely different results at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we had to stop being friends years ago because of his poor attitude. And I mentioned one of the main reasons is because for him, life's a bitch and then you die. And for me, life is a grand adventure.
Right.
And when I had said what his philosophy was, the young man in the back seat, I think he's 19, 20, said, "Oh, yeah, that's the way it is." And I just kept talking and kind of ignored him. And my buddy and I were then talking about it in this concept of life is what you make of it. And though we had physically similar starting points, socioeconomic starting points, our thoughts took us in two different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got done with the project, got home, weren't driving, I was about to go home, the young man in the back said, completely surprised me, he said, "I hate that I see myself as a victim, and I don't want to, and I don't know how to change that."
Oh, cool.
This is a kid who is on medication, is stoned most of the day, every day, and he had the wherewithal to go, "I know that's how I think, I don't like it, and I don't know how to change it."
Right.
And one of the things that I realized why he brought that up with me was because, one, there's enough of an age gap, 10, 11 years, where he can relate to me, but he still knows that I'm ahead of him, not just in age wise.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And, I drive a nice truck. My buddy, he drives a nice truck. They're buddies. He wants to know, okay, how can I have a nice truck? I know for me, that's one of the ways that I got out of some of my ruts was I got sick and tired of living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
and I wanted to have a nice vehicle. It
Right.
was very basic, materialistic. Some people may say, "Oh, that's just materialistic." Well, it's what
Hmm.
inspired me. Okay,
Right.
we have to work with what we have.
Right. So I would say to him, the place to start is focusing on what do you want, not how are you going to get it.
Okay.
You have to have the image in your mind of you having a nice truck, driving a nice truck. But what is a nice truck to you? Is it a Ford? Is it a Chevy? Is it four-wheel drive? Is it two-wheel drive? Is it electric? You have to focus on what is your idea of a nice truck. And then imagining yourself driving the truck, having conversations with your friends while they're in the truck with you, and they're complimenting you on the truck. They're complimenting the whole idea of you having that truck is very much in harmony with the energy that is going on within the cab. And you do that, and it's one of the hardest things to train yourself to do at the front end, is that you can imagine anything that you choose to imagine. So
Yeah.
what he's doing is he's imagining that his life is a bitch, and then he's going to die. Um, and it is, and that's what's going to happen if he doesn't change his basic beliefs, if he doesn't change his basic thoughts. Now, there's two ways that you can change basic thoughts. One way is to keep on imagining. I have formed the habit of setting down every morning for an hour in a chair with an upright back on it. I set upright. I put blinders on, a blindfold on, so that if I open my eyes during this hour of meditation and thought, that I don't see light. I don't see anything. And that keeps from distracting me from looking at what I'm seeing. So I can imagine things for an hour, and there are times whenever I would swear I was only in that state for 5 minutes and an hour had gone past. You're so focused on the joy of having accomplished that, of having that in your life so that you experience. Uh, one of my things right now is a new house. I designed it in my mind 30 years ago, but one of the criteria was I didn't want to start on it until I could pay cash for it.
And plus, you've built a house before, so you can get
Right. Yeah.
super
I've
detailed
built
on it.
162 houses actually. And so I know where every stud goes. I know where every fastener goes. I know where the plumbing goes. I know where the heating goes. I have built this thing in my mind over and over and over again, sometimes off and on for 30 years, where I wouldn't think about it for 6 months at a time. But now that I'm understanding this law of nature, this source law, this energy that we're talking about, the way, now that I understand the way, I do this every day.
Right.
This is a part of my process of starting every day with imagining myself living in that house, having parties there, um, just the absolute joy of the beauty in it. And it's one of the things that I've learned over the years, is that I really appreciate beautiful things. And it's not that I need that kind of square footage or anything, but it has to be that particular square footage in order to get the facade to look the way I want the facade to look, so that whenever people come up in front of the house, they go, wow.
Right.
Not because it's big and grandiose, but because of all the details, because of, rounded porches and a whole turret that sticks out from my office 4 foot, and my desk is in this turret that goes out onto the porch, and a wine cellar that holds 12, 1,500 bottles of wine. Um,
So a month's supply.
right, yeah.
Right. So
Basically.
so that's one thing. I think it was maybe Wayne Dyer who said, "The devil may be in the details, but so is God." And that's one of the things with the breakfast I host every Thursday that you come to, and these friends of ours come to, and associates, is I live in a bachelor pad.
hmm
It's we've had other people host us for breakfast because they want to reciprocate, and all of their homes are nicer, their dishes are nicer, they have, you know, the two who have hosted the most elsewhere, they're European, they have that stuff, they're much older than I am, all of those things. However, the experiences I had knowing you for the last 12 years, growing up with my mother, enjoying that presentation of knowing what to do with what you have, I know I make an impression on the guests that I have as
hmm
well. It's nothing necessarily fancy, but the things that I have, they're well presented. I
hmm
have the platters. It's stuff they're not accustomed to eating, which is easy to do because there's so many different ways to do things. But from the French press I have to making the lattes to the double walled glass cups I use,
hmm
focusing on those details, that I think is the physical part of it. But I think what it really shows, and what the people we're friends with see and recognize, is the attention and the intention behind what I'm doing.
Right.
When I do it, when I'm showing that I've put thought into it
hmm
and that I'm receiving sincere pleasure, I get to relish in not just the end result of having my friends around so we can talk and enjoy a meal, but actually enjoying the process. You've talked about your buddy who owns a restaurant, and he'll come in and make a show of he just came out of the back with the fresh spices and the fresh vegetables, and this is what's going in there, and people love it.
hmm
And that's what I think about too when I host, is it's a little bit of showmanship, but it's also a sincere expression of I'm enjoying what I'm doing,
hmm
and I enjoy the fact that you're here because you bring something.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that for the last year has kept people coming back, is the fact that they feel sincerely appreciated. They
hmm
feel
Right.
welcome. They feel a sense of contribution just by being there. And not just by me as a host, but the other people who come. Well, we gel very well.
Right. And the energy that you put off is that of a genuine person.
Thank you.
You are focused enough to realize those distinctions and then try to share them with others. And that's one of the secrets of these laws of nature are they allow you to interact with other people in a way that you can actually lift this other person's life up. If you go back to that 19-year-old you were talking to the other day and you say to him, I thought about what you said and I have a suggestion for you.
Okay.
My suggestion is not to try to figure out how you're going to have a new truck or whatever it is that you want, but you have to focus your intention on having the new thing in a way that you are grateful. You are experiencing the mood in the moment. That's why it's important to see yourself driving down the road, see yourself pulling up in front of your buddy's house, and they're going, "Ooh," um, and the conversations that you would have in the truck, and how would you feel if you were the type of person who could easily afford that kind of truck. And that's one of the things to put into it too, especially if you're coming out of a poverty background, is that you need to imagine these things from an emotional standpoint that you can easily afford what it is that you want. You
Right.
know, it's like me in the house. If I pay cash for it, it's because I can easily afford it. That it'll cost $1 million is that's just the way it is.
Right.
It will do that. And once I have the $1 million, that's the first thing I'm going to do is attack that house.
Right. I went through the same process when I bought my first motorcycle because it may sound like a small thing, but what was a come to Jesus moment for me, a remarkable event in my life, was I was thrilled when I was able to keep about $200 cash stacked away
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't owe anybody. And the first motorcycle I bought was $1,800. I also needed gear. I also needed to register it, insure it, do all this stuff. I think it came out to around 2,400 when it was all said and done. And I had no idea how I was supposed to accomplish that. But for about a year, I had been lusting after a motorcycle, and I didn't even know what I wanted. I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want a stretched out cruiser and a Harley. That just wasn't my taste. And by a very strange turn of events, I ended up at a buddy's husband's house, a buddy's sister's friend's husband's house, and 50 yards away in the dusty carport, I saw a bike, and I went, "Ooh, what's that?" "Oh, that's my brother's bike. It's stored here." I said, "Oh, yeah? Yeah, he wants to sell it." "Really?" I had never seen a bike like this before. It was a CB750 Nighthawk Honda. I just knew I liked it. It was just love at first sight. And within 3 months, that bike was mine. Less than 3 months.
Yeah.
And it was $1,800. I paid cash for it. No idea where the money came from.
Right.
Haven't a clue.
Yeah.
And I was making $10 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, I had no idea, but looking back on it, I could remember getting physically excited and bouncing up and down in my car when I would pass by a bike or a group of bikers,
Mm-hmm.
and I would see that, and I could imagine what it would be like to have the wind in my hair and hear the rush and feel the instant acceleration and feel all of that. And it was one of those things where I didn't have to make myself think about it. I had to make myself not think about it so I could focus on something else.
Right.
And talking with you about it after that manifested, occurred, came about, was one of those things that really I at last had experience of truth.
Right.
Growing up the way I did, I knew about it. It's a bit like knowing how to drive a car until you actually get in a car and you have to go through all that stuff.
Right.
And once I did that, it just became this is what it takes. This is what I can do. And it also became a litmus test of what was truly
Mm-hmm.
important to me, of if I'm not obsessing over it for more than a week, it's probably not that important to me.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the big things to do is to make up your mind. Take some time and make up your mind, is this idea something that is important enough to me for me to pursue it? Am I going to close my eyes every morning and give another 15 minutes of time to imagining this idea having taken place? And if it's not worth the extra time, if that's interrupting some of your other schedules, it means that the other schedule is more important than that.
Right. Well, a question on that. For people who, myself included, don't feel deserving, don't feel worthy, if they're at a point where this is something that they would like, it's a thing they've thought about for years, maybe even obsessed over, but they ignore it out of a sense of that's too far out of reach, I have no idea how to get there, and maybe even that stuff isn't for a person like me.
Mm-hmm.
is there, because I struggle with this idea of where, okay, I have an idea, and I do kind of obsess over it, but at the same time, it's one of those things where I kind of shunt out of my head because it seems so extraordinary, so amazing, where maybe that's just not for me, but it's something that keeps coming back.
Mm-hmm. What I would suggest you do is every night whenever you go to bed, get comfortable laying in there wherever, if you sleep on your side or your back, whatever, get yourself comfortable, and then close your eyes and imagine being successful at whatever it is that you have in mind, and just try to focus your mind on the feeling of it has already happened. How would you feel whenever it's already happened? And go to sleep while you're thinking those thoughts. And at first, you're going to have that interruption. You're going to have that, oh, something doesn't feel right to me. That's whenever you have to, okay, I am a conscious creator, and I have to use my consciousness, create what I want, not what I don't want. I've got years of practice in creating what I don't want. I got all the scars to prove it.
Right, right. One of the things that I've done before when I've been stuck in that process, and it's one of the reasons why I hang out with you and our mutual friends the way I do, is to literally remind myself, create that mind again of
Mm-hmm.
these ideas, is to remind myself of these things. And one of the things I've done before is looking at where I want to go instead of where I don't want to go, because especially at high speed on a motorcycle, the best way to hit an object is to look at it and go,
Right.
I don't want to hit
Yeah,
that.
right. Yeah.
That's the best way, and it can just cause disaster. And one thing I've done where if I can't, for whatever reason, bring myself to actually visualize myself where I want to be and image myself there, I at least can consciously make myself present to not dwell on what I don't want.
Mm-hmm. One of the ideas, and I'm sure you'll remember this, whenever you were 19 or so, and you were living with me, and you just had the jobs. Uh, I was telling you that there was two things that you needed to do. One was to save up $100 and put $100 bill in your pocket.
Mm.
The other one was to fill up your car every time you gassed up.
Right.
And, oh no, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. No, you have to do that. You have to do that. If you want to be wealthy, you've got to be able to have money in your pocket without it burning a hole in your pocket, so that you spend it, because that's where you were. That's why you had the challenges that you had when you were 19, was you didn't do that whenever you were 12.
Right. Right.
And then how just within 3 or 4 years time, you had done that, and then it became normal for you to walk around with $100 bill in your pocket. And once that became normal, then I said, okay, now what you need to do is carry $1,000 in your pocket. And oh no, that's way too much. I can't do that. But within a year or so, you were walking around with $1,000 in your pocket.
And then a year after that, I was walking around with 5.5, and that was when I realized this is uncomfortable in my jeans.
Right.
And I was like, maybe I shouldn't be walking around with this much cash. But I did it.
Right. And I do it all the time. I mean, I have enough cash on me that I could buy $1 million worth of real estate, securing it with what I have in my pocket.
Right.
And it's not a matter of being able to purchase outright something. Um, I One of my favorite memories is I like guns. I've always liked guns, and I was in a gun shop over in Montana, and the gun shop had just gotten in this original Sharps rifle. Well, I have an interest in those things, but I have a buddy that collects them. And I picked up my phone and I called my buddy and I said, "Hey, I'm in Montana. There's a Sharps here, da 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 da. This is what it is. This is what the serial number is. This is, all the details I could give him." And I said, how much money would you pay today for that gun? And he says, "Oh, I'd give you $5,000 for it." Well, I pulled money out of my pocket and I bought it for $1,500. And then I drove right to his place and presented it to him, and he gave me $5,000 for it.
Good day's work.
Yeah, it was a pleasurable thing the whole way around. I mean, I got to buy something that I had an interest in. I got to travel through the country, and he lives up toward Canada. So I had that pleasure of driving through that part of the country. I had the pleasure of visiting with him. He was delighted to have the gun. He probably got twice that out of it. That's
Right.
the way he operates.
Right. But he had the resources and connections to do all that.
Right, and that's why paying attention to other people and what they really, really, really like. Because if you come across something, they're somebody you ought to talk to.
Right. Well, the idea of providing value to people, of not just providing direct service, but providing value. One of the things I found with my clients being in their homes and in such close proximity with them is figuring out what's important to them, and then maybe showcasing it a little bit more. For the most part, all clients are interested in me doing a good job in a timely fashion.
Mm-hmm.
That's first and foremost
Right.
what they're paying for, is to take this problem off of their hands, and it's done in a timely fashion, and it inconveniences them the least, and it's a good job so they don't have to worry about it.
Right.
And then if I can find out, well, what else is important to them? A lot of them have kids and grandkids my age.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important for them is a sense that the world isn't completely without hope.
Mm-hmm.
And they love seeing a younger person succeed. And that was one thing I picked up, because growing up the way I did, around the people I did, in the backwoods town I did, I was very shy at first to tell clients that I was taking off for Europe for 3 months at the end of the season, because they would ask, "Oh, what do you do when it's too cold to work a squeegee?" And I would have to tell them honestly while I travel to Europe. And it took about 10 times of going through that experience before I realized what people like my clients don't think when they hear that is not what they hear is not what people in my hometown would hear of, you're either making way too much or you're going into debt and you're being stupid, which for me neither was true. I was making $10 an hour, and what my clients were hearing was, I'm disciplining myself and budgeting in order for me to do this
Right.
while I'm young and I can travel. And they were all about it. They would tip me more because of that. Like,
Sure.
here's a little help along the way.
Yep.
And when I began to realize this is what these people cared about, was a hardworking young person doing what is important for him or her self development, all of these things. Because I could tell a story about what I did and these things I experienced and what I learned and how I got such an appreciation more for where I lived because I could go outside of it and look back and I had perspective and I really enjoyed being in Germany and I love the culture and the language and all of these things. But boy, did it make me love being in America that much more.
Right.
Because I would be gone long enough where I would get homesick. And that
Right.
was a really wonderful thing. And for them to see me get excited and happy and sincerely enjoy these experiences, some of them kind of lived vicariously through me. But what they were hearing was this kid isn't just working a job. He's
Right.
he there are things that are important to him beyond what's happening this
Yeah.
weekend. And being able to communicate that to them, it may sound abstract or maybe all in my head, but I've been doing this for so long where I know it's true that part of the value they got from it was a sense of contribution that they were paying a wage. The time should be fine
Oh.
for at least a few more.
Oh. Okay.
And that they had a sense of contribution to something more than just, oh, he's making a wage and
Mm-hmm.
he's surviving and
Right. Yeah.
it,
He's got a plan and working the plan.
and they wanted to be a part of that plan
Sure.
because they either they saw themselves when they were my age
Oh,
or
sure.
their kids or their grandkids and it's like good on you, man,
Oh, yeah.
get after it and you should get to it. So we had been talking about people who would see me work and hear these stories and see themselves in my position and feel good about a contribution towards that of
Oh, yeah. They remember whenever they were, trying to do the same thing themselves. It might not have been, the same thing, but it was having a goal and working toward it and trying to figure your way through the maze and all of that sort of thing. Um, and of course, it's one of the things that window cleaning is such a sleeper business in my mind is that the amount of money that one guy can make at it is just amazing. The other thing is that the people that hire window cleaners are people who are financially successful
right,
and they love somebody who's trying to build their success. It reminds them of when they were your age and that sort of thing. And, that's how you wash a guy's windows and you charge him $1,500 for his beach house and he tips you $500 on
right,
top of it.
right, yeah,
That's why you gave him the opportunity for him to relive his life vicariously through your actions. And they were exciting times.
oh yeah,
I mean, I remember whenever I first moved to Idaho and determined that I wanted to get into the building business. Well, I didn't have enough money to pay attention. I mean, I just didn't have any, but I went out and I got myself a job in construction and that progressed on and I worked so diligently in trying to learn everything I could about construction that the guy that hired me offered me a partnership. And of course I went for it.
right,
However, his idea of a partnership was I would do the work and we would split the money. That wasn't my idea of a partnership. And so I pulled away from that and just decided I would go out on my own and didn't have any money, didn't have credit, didn't have any of those things. And I ended up worming my way into a position to where I really didn't have any credit and I had screwed everything up. I knew how to build the house, but I didn't understand anything about banking or financing or anything like that. And ended up in a real pickle. And it took me, I'm going to say, a year and a half, as I remember, to figure out where I had gone wrong. Where did the breakdown happen? Because man, I was struggling. I mean, I was married with a little baby boy, and I was walking up and down the streets picking up beer cans and pop bottles to turn them in to get 5 cents here and there, and um, I would trade into anything I could just to keep my family together, and I had really screwed the pooch bad in that process. And then I found somebody who was willing to work with me and try to explain to me what I had done wrong. And once I understood that, they were willing to help me, and that went through a whole bunch of processes. Finally, it got down to I got that problem solved and sold that house. And I went back down to the bank and I said to the banker, I want to build houses. And I know that I need to have certain credits, I need to have certain things like that. But I don't know what they are. And he said to me, well, tell me your plan. And I said, well, I'd like to build two houses at a time because I can do the concrete work, I can frame them, I can side them, I can roof them, I can paint them. I'd sub out the plumbing and electrical and maybe hanging the sheetrock, maybe not if I'm not busy with something else. Um, and then I'd do the painting and everything like that, sub out the carpet and linoleum and do all the trim work. And he said, so how much would you need in order to be able to do that, to build two houses at a time? Well, this was back in the 70s, the early 70s, and houses were selling for about $35,000 to $40,000. So I needed about $25,000 a piece because uh, I was doing all the labor, and I needed that much just to buy the materials and that stuff, to get be able to complete the house. And so I told him I needed $50,000. I'll never forget. He opened up the drawer on his desk, pulled out a checkbook that was about that big. He wrote me a check for 50,000.
Hmm.
And I was just amazed. And I asked him, why did he do that? And he said that the bank can lend money to anybody. The problem is getting it back. And I had proven to him that I would pay it back. And everything changed for me in a heartbeat.
I remember you sharing this with me one time, and you said some of the backstory was with you being upside down and backwards on all this stuff. One of the things you had made sure of was that all of your contractors had gotten paid. Whereas
Right?
instead of just going bankrupt and everyone taking a loss, you you had made sure that to the best of your ability your contractors got paid and that they weren't taking a loss.
Yeah.
And so that's what you meant when you said you had proven to him that you could pay it back,
Right.
was because you made sure it got paid back when you didn't have to.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the things with my old employer was his his dad, the boss, was very reticent to contract with me and do a lot of things, which turned out to be a real blessing because if I had been being paid more, I may have been stuck in a job instead of going out on my own, which I don't think would have happened, but it would have delayed it just because it would have been more comfortable
Right.
and more safe. And one of the things that occurred was I got a call from a prospective client while I was still working for Jeremy, and I didn't recognize the name, and I didn't recognize the address, and I went to give them a bid, and I realized we had done their house in my hometown while I was working for the outfit. And I realized that when the wife came home and I met her, and I said, "Oh, you were a client for us, and I'm just working on a weekend, and I don't feel right about taking a client." And she said, "Well, it's not like I heard about you because you did the job. I heard about you from my mom's friend, and you did their place. It was through the grapevine." And I said, "I get that and I appreciate that, but it goes against my rules. I can't do this without my boss's permission." And she said, "Well, I'm not going to tell him. This was in a town 60 miles away. My boss wouldn't have found out. The boss would not have found out. But it was one of my rules." And I stepped away and I said, "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm going to call up my boss. I'll tell him the situation. If he says it's okay, I'll do it. If not, I'm going to have to walk away. I'm sorry." She kind of shrugged and said, "Okay." And I walked away, called my boss, told him the situation, and he said, because the prospective client had said she had been trying to get a hold of the boss for about a month, and he was just too busy and couldn't set up the work for a trip that far away, and told my boss the situation, and he said, "Listen, if we haven't been able to get to it and it's on your time and you want to do it, and like you said, it's through the grapevine, it's not like you gave her a business card behind our backs." He said, "Do it, and if it comes up with Dad, we'll take care of it." And I did the job, and within about a month, the dad called my boss, and said, "Hey, I'm looking at setting up a day or two in St. Mary's. We have the work for it." And my boss said, "Well, he already took care of it. Micah took care of it." And the boss was a little perturbed. And my boss went to bat for me and said, "Listen, Dad, he called. He asked my permission. I gave him my permission. Why on earth would you do that? Dad, he called. This is where he's from. He knows a lot of the people. They heard about him through the grapevine. This is what he's doing. I gave him my blessing. It's fine." He didn't have to do that, and he did. And then the next year when I quit, they gave me 6 accounts as a severance.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those small things, that there may not be an instant reciprocation or result, but especially over time, things like that stack up. And like with your experience, you can't plan stuff out like that.
Right.
The way Jim Rohn had said it when it comes to personal philosophy is that one's personal philosophy is the set of the sails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't make any difference which way the wind blows. It just makes a difference of how you set the sails.
Right. Well, where has this brought you so far with functioning in the way, aligning yourself with the way, practicing the way? Where has it brought you, and what has it brought you, and what do you see, where do you see yourself going with it?
Well, I see practicing the way, looking for those signs and that stuff as something that I'll do for the rest of my life. Um, it brings me such joy of being able to sit down and plan out an idea that I think would be valuable to the masses. Whether the masses is 100 people or 3 or 5 million people. Um, but figuring something out that a certain percentage of the masses would benefit greatly from it, and for me to find out a way to communicate it to them, and then as far as making money off of it. If I could save them $100 or make them, with my ideas, make them $100, I wouldn't charge any more than $10 for it.
Mm.
It has to be valuable enough to the person that buying is a no-brainer. And then once they have experience with it, then of course they've got it.
Right. Well, it's like what we had talked about, bringing value to people. Earl Nightingale, back in the 40s, was saying how, 40s and 50s, how the only way we become successful, he had a specific definition of success, but the only way to become successful is providing service.
Right.
And our success is in direct proportion to how well we serve how many people.
Right.
Which was one of his beliefs in the free and open market, was the one who succeeds is the one who provides the best service to the most amount of people.
Right. Yeah, and today with all of the internet and how many people you can reach with a podcast, um, the amount of money you can make is just phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. A person today, I don't even think it makes any difference with their age. A person today that is getting into that field has access to the rest of the world.
Right.
That's more than 8 billion people. And you just have to figure out how to serve a small percentage of them. If you ended up getting a penny apiece, you'd still have more money than you could use in the rest of your life.
Right. Right. Well, that was one of the things that was making me laugh, because it was taking me back to the $100 in my billfold, and then the $1,000, and going from there. I just remember how insurmountable that seemed. It was such an obstacle, and I was talking with Trina about it last time, of being on that cusp of competency and unknowing being a real place of excitement and joy.
Mm-hmm.
And, that line between chaos and order, of where chaos, one can see it as unlimited potential.
Right.
And then it's the thoughts and beliefs, personal philosophy, that then brings order to the chaos.
Yeah.
And then orders it in the manner that you want it to be. And sometimes when it's not the way you want it to be, it's because your thoughts were not aligned with how you actually want things to be.
Right.
You were focused so much on where you don't want to go that's where it actually took you.
Yeah. And personal philosophy is a really powerful point that I don't think a lot of people make. And I think they don't make it because they've been handed a philosophy from the time they came out of the womb. And that philosophy that they were handled might have been a philosophy from 10 generations before them, that, oh no, we're not the type of family that ever makes any money. We're not the type of family who has a glorious, fun life. We're not that type.
And then if you step out of line, you get whacked for it.
Oh man, if you want to get rid of your relatives and you were raised in poverty, just tell them that you want to make a bunch of money, or that you have made a bunch of money.
Right.
And if you really want to piss them off, you tell them that you made 10 times more than they did on their best year, and you did it in 2 months.
Yeah, that sure is a way to make friends and influence people, Cliff.
Right, yeah. But not your family.
I know, and that's one of the wild things with my personal philosophy, seeing how sometimes it's in direct opposition with my siblings, which creates no end of irritation and frustration, especially on their part, because I just don't listen. Being the youngest, I just don't listen. And how can you do something so stupid when, we were raised in the same household and we have the same genes and all that stuff? So, how on earth, if you're different, it's because you're being willfully so, and that makes you a brat.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had the results they thought I should have, they wouldn't be so irritated with me.
Right.
There'd be no frustration. They would just feel sorry for me. Oh, look at poor Micah. He keeps screwing up and he won't listen. But instead, where I'm actually having a joyful, adventurous life. I mean, I still recall one time I talked to my sister this spring, and she calls up and she said, "Hey, blah 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 blah." Brought up something kind of innocuous. Then she said, "Well, what are you doing tonight?" I said, "Oh, I'm going out on a date." She said, "Oh yeah, where?" I said, "Oh, Old Town Istanbul." And she goes, "Wait." I said, "Yeah, I'm over in Turkey." And she was like, "Okay." It's just like she was shocked, but then again, she wasn't disbelieving.
Right.
It was just like, "Well, of course you are." It's just, and
Yeah.
and
That's why you're my stupid little brother.
that's why you're my stupid little brother. That sounds just like something you would do.
Yeah. You
Uh,
couldn't get lunch anywhere but Old Town Istanbul.
right,
Istanbul.
right, and having that philosophy it's just different. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, or I'm not saying I'm right or that they're wrong or I'm better. It's for me. I've picked out some things where these are things that are important to me. There are some things that are not important to me, and there are some things that I absolutely do not want to have in my life. Not going to go there, not going to touch them, and I can't do that. Like I have a very successful brother, and he's in a corporate union job. I couldn't do that. I would be in a warm bathtub with a razor blade so darn quick. It's just like no. And I don't think he's bad or wrong for doing that. He's an engineer, and thank God we have people like that building our bridges. But I can't do it.
Right.
I can't do it. I won't do it. Absolutely refuse. And but for him, that's the only thing in the world that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, it does. And good on
Right.
him. I'm glad he found a thing he likes and a way he found his way, and he seems to be enjoying it, and he seems to be thriving, and he's doing the thing, and he's a committed husband and father and family man and does all those good things. I want to be the exact same way. I'm just there's no way I'm doing it that way.
All right.
When when you came here, what was the underlying purpose to come across the country to Idaho?
Oh, the underlying purpose was to hunt elk. that was that was the big thing for me. I remember whenever I was a kid, I was born and raised on a dairy farm, a subsistence farm in central Pennsylvania, and my parents didn't hunt at all, but someone had brought by a magazine, and it was like an outdoor life or something like that. And on the front cover, there was a guy with a big bull elk that he had killed in Idaho. And I read that magazine till the ink wore off the pages. I mean, to tell you, I could just imagine him, out here hunting and that kind of stuff. And I took that on as a philosophy. And then one of those little thoughts that you have in your head, I'm 10 years old or something whenever that happened, and I had no way of knowing. It was just, oh, I want to go to Idaho and hunt elk and that stuff. And life went on, and I went to the Marines, and one of the guys I met in just after boot camp, we went to infantry training regiment and into schools company. And when I went to schools company, I met a guy who lived in Idaho. He lived in Boise, and we became good friends. And we're all hunters and all that kind of stuff. And on the weekends, I was stationed in North Carolina, so we would drive up to Pennsylvania on the weekends and go hunting and that sort of thing. So he had been at my place many times. So whenever I read Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, when I was 23, and I was married, and my wife was pregnant with our first child. And the highest thing on my list was hunting elk. And I called my buddy, and he said, "Oh yeah, Boise's booming." I was working for a lumber company, so and I had been involved in construction before before I went to the Marines, and so we packed everything up, sold everything we had, put it all in a car, and whenever I left Pennsylvania, I had $123 in my pocket, and I was behind 1 month in the car payment, and you know, packed up a wife and a 2-week-old baby, and across the country we came, and in short order didn't have enough money to go back.
Well, when you make a commitment, you burn the ships.
Yep, yep. That's exactly what happened. Was we burnt those bridges, and of course, being 23, 24 years old, just absolutely invincible. And by God, I was.
I think, therefore, I am.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been fun about doing this podcast is because it's not just an excuse to sit down and talk with my friends, but the way we've all been harmonizing. There's a lot of different things going on with the six of us. And we all bring a different perspective, and I don't want to dabble in platitudes and cliches, but the way that we've been able to have the conversations we do, where we have disagreed with each other in the group, but it's not out of a place of being disagreeable or trying to prove another person wrong. It's been a good faith attempt of, if you saw it this way, I think you would have better results.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the fun things is you're the old wise man of the group, and I'm the youngster. And I talked about it with Trina, how I'm the least successful out of our entire group. And she said, well, you are the youngest, though. And she said, you just need another idea. Maybe a little time as well, but you need just another idea. And that's one of the reasons why she agreed to be my business coach. Having this podcast and talking about all these things that we talk over breakfast or dinner, the reason I'm interested in doing this podcast and why it's important to me is I wish I had something like this when I was younger.
Right.
And it's not even, I was thinking mostly about teens and 20-somethings, but especially now with my buddies who are participating in this with me, you, Jeremy, Mike, Verena, Trina, it brings such a different perspective where I remember you remarking to me when we first met when I was 19, you expressed enthusiasm and joy at being able to talk to me about these things because you said, I was talking about things that you hadn't thought of until you were in your 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to share this way with each other and have these conversations that we'll be having anyhow.
Right.
And recording them and putting them out there to where other people can listen, and my sincere hope is other people get value from it.
Sure.
It's another way to contribute and get a sense of contribution. And There we go. And also, it's an excuse to hang out because I'm the only bachelor. I don't have kids or grandkids or a wife or any of that. And, this is one more excuse to hang out with my friends
Right,
and
right.
actually have a good time and have enlightening conversations and really get
Well, and
into the weeds.
it's good for me because I really enjoy trying to help other people, and it's the only group uh, that wants help, wants my help in the process, and it's a wonderful thing that it's been developing this way. It's I had a stroke about a year and a half ago, and that was a real wake up call for me. And rather than what the stroke did to me physically, instead of concentrating on that, I'm concentrating on what it did for me, what it's doing for me in this process, which is taking this new business that I'm trying to create into the marketplace and using all my skills, and the marketplace is over the internet, and I have no experience in that at all. So this group is really valuable to me, just to be able to do these podcasts, and especially to get in on the ground floor where this is first or second podcast, fourth or fifth podcast you've ever done,
Right.
and
It's my second one with someone else.
oh, right, yeah. Yeah, and people were probably tired of hearing you talk to yourself.
Right, right. Well, I'm not tired of hearing myself
Yeah,
talk
right.
to myself.
Obviously.
Right. I don't like the way I sound on microphone, but I like the way I sound through my own ears.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to our next podcast. I think that's a good place to wrap it up on.
Okay. Good.
And thanks so much for being here, Cliff. And I look forward to seeing you on Thursday for breakfast. And
Yep. Thank you, and we'll meet over here Saturday morning again, huh?
yes, sir. Sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.